For many, Adolf Hitler is the ultimate evil.
Deutsches Volk hilft dir selbst.
Dictator of Nazi Germany, orchestrator of the Holocaust, and instigator of a world war which resulted in the death of over 60 million people. But Hitler did not act alone. The atrocities of the Nazis required a vast network of collaborators, who were the men and women who carried out Hitler's ruthless orders.
They were all sick pigs. It's like picking a disease you want to die from.
To what depths of depravity did they sink?
How dare you look up my dress? And she would take her riding crop and hit them in the face with that.
And who is considered by some to be as evil as Hitler himself? This is Nazis' Ultimate Evil. For many, the Nazi reign of terror begins on November 8th, 1923. A young Adolf Hitler, backed by 600 SA troops, storms a political meeting in a Munich beer hall in a coup attempt that comes to be known as the Beer Hall Putsch. Here, Hitler establishes the pattern that will make his reign of terror possible, relying on a close circle of conspirators to perpetrate his evil, including this World War I pilot destined to become his right-hand man, Hermann Goering.
Goering's mother once made a famous comment that Hermann will either become a great man or a great criminal.
I think the thing to understand about Goering is as a demonic Falstaff, a huge, fat, loudish, thieving creature of appetite.
Goering's journey towards infamy begins on day 2 of the Beer Hall Putsch, when local police violently put an end to the coup attempt. 20 are killed, and Goering takes a bullet.
When Goering was shot in Munich during the Putsch, he was hospitalized afterwards. It was a quite serious wound. He was given morphine in the hospital to combat the pain, and Goering became quite addicted to morphine.
When Goering seeks treatment for his addiction, the recommendation is total withdrawal. The results are nightmarish.
He became very volatile. When he was in treatment, he threw stuff around. He threatened his wife. He became dangerous. And the doctors in Sweden told his wife that he was a threat to other people.
He was in such a violent condition from the morphine and the effects of it and the paranoia and trying to come off of it, that his wife and family finally had him committed to a mental institution out of Stockholm, where they were at the time. And they put him in a straitjacket because they couldn't control him.
After treatment, Goering returns to Hitler's side and helps orchestrate the Nazis' earliest atrocities.
Goering played a big role in drafting the Nuremberg laws that made many things in the lives of German Jews impossible for them.
Goering's actions on Hitler's behalf are only the beginning of the Nazis' assault on Germany's 500,000 Jews. Richard and Margot Springer are among the first wave of innocents in the Nazis' crosshairs. Their son is TV personality Jerry Springer.
My parents were married a month and a half after Hitler came into power. And then the laws started to change about Jews being able to own businesses and being against the law to buy from Jews, etc. And we have pictures in the family album of, Juden Nazi swastikas on store windows. So life became pretty, in the small town of Lundsburg where they lived, it became very uncomfortable.
As Goering makes it his mission to make the lives of German Jews miserable, he enriches his own with the trappings of wealth and power.
Goering, to me, is a Nazi version of Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous on steroids and twisted.
Goering was fond of pageantry, uniforms, how things looked were really important to him. He had an estate that he called Karenhall, named after his first wife, and he kept a tame lion there.
He'd throw these bizarre, ridiculous parties that were just beyond people's imagination. He would show up in luxuriant red togas, fur capes, He would wear the green costume of a hugely fat Robin Hood. It was a ludicrous kind of spectacle that he made, but on the other hand, all the high and mighty of the land would go to these parties and often be grossed out by the spectacle of debauchery there.
Adding insult to injury, Goering often pays for his life of excess by stealing on a grand scale.
Goering forced Jewish businesses to sell to him at a fraction of what they were worth. And after a while, he realized, hell, we're running the country. I don't even have to pay them anything. Just steal it.
Goering certainly presided over the most massive art theft in the history of the world. He ransacked museums, he ransacked private collections, he stole from the Jews that he sent to the concentration camps.
He was diverting rail lines that were carrying war goods to the Eastern Front at time to bring back stolen paintings and war booty.
It is estimated that he ended up having a collection of 1,800 paintings, several thousand other artworks, and his collection was the second largest collection after Hitler's.
Hermann Goering was Hitler's most trusted lieutenant. He did everything in his power to carry out his Führer's vision of evil. But the atrocities they committed together can exist only in a culture where evil is not outlawed, but embraced. Another member of Hitler's inner circle is the architect of that culture, a master spin doctor who tries to justify Hitler's evil to the world, Joseph Goebbels.
Goebbels definitely was distorted and twisted in some way by his childhood diseases and deformity.
Goebbels had infantile paralysis in his right foot, and he had an operation when he was quite young, but the operation was not successful, and as a result, he had a limp for the rest of his life.
He was rejected from serving in World War I by the German military because of his limp, and that was to his great disdain and dishonor. And he had the curse of being only 5'4", so he was really, literally the little man with the little man syndrome, looking to be someone, and he found it in Adolf Hitler in the Third Reich.
Before Goebbels is discovered by Hitler, he is a failure as a novelist. He blames that and virtually all his problems on the Jews. Hitler decides to tap his virulent anti-Semitism and talent for fiction by putting him in charge of Nazi propaganda.
He does film, he does pamphlets, he gets books, he burns books, he has book burnings, he's at them, and he tries to convince the German people that Jews are your enemy because they're part of the culture, but they're not really German.
Every problem that Germany had was, in terms of the propaganda, was the fault of the Jews. And that appeared in newspaper ads, it appeared in newspaper articles, it appeared in billboards.
Goebbels was in charge of the entire German film industry, and he really went to town, and he made these hard anti-Semitic films such as Jude Sus, Pig Jew. Oh, there was another one called The Eternal Jew.
In this film, for example, he showed routes by which Jews had migrated throughout the world. And then in the montage of sort of pictures of that, those routes turn into rats. And so the idea is that Jews equal rats.
All of a sudden, it starts to form in government policy that you don't really object to. It's just the lack of respect for something that is different. That's how it starts.
Goebbels' goal goes farther than inciting hatred of the Jews. He seeks to ignite action that will stamp them out. He gets his chance on November 7th, 1938, when a Jewish refugee assassinates a Nazi diplomat. Goebbels misrepresents the shooting as a Jewish revolt and makes a fiery speech calling for violent retribution.
He gets all the forces into a frenzy to be able to go out one night and essentially have riots, organized disorder by the armed forces and the police, smashing Jewish shops, Jewish-owned businesses, torching them, doing synagogues, killing Jews. It's a frenzy of violence.
I believe 30,000 Jews were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Many of those were killed in the concentration camps.
Everybody goes crazy, and even Hitler's mad with him because the entire world condemns it.
Hitler's objections aside, Goebbels' goal is achieved.
So part of the impetus of the Night of Shattered Glass was to really step up the emigration of Jews from Germany, and it was very effective.
It was clear by 1939 that most of the Jews were trying to get out of the country. My mom and dad were the last Jews that got out of Germany. They got out the third week of August of 1939. A week and a half later, Hitler goes into Poland on September 1st, starting World War II, and then the gates were shut. None of my relatives were able to escape.
Hitler relies on Joseph Goebbels to whip up public support for his evil vision. But it is up to another member of his inner circle to actually carry them out. A former chicken farmer who many believe may be more evil than Hitler himself, Heinrich Himmler. Adolf Hitler stands alone as history's ultimate evil. But his crimes against humanity are on a scale so vast that he can't do it alone. During his rise to power, he has relied on the ruthlessness of Hermann Goering and the cunning of Joseph Goebbels. But as Hitler leads the world into war in 1939, another of his henchmen takes center stage. He has failed as a chicken farmer and fertilizer salesman, but has risen to command Hitler's SS, Heinrich Himmler.
We see the photos of him, and he looks like this meek little bank clerk with the pince-nez glasses and the little mustache. And I think because of that, he seemed even more sinister, because you never knew what was going on behind those eyes.
When I think about Himmler, the phrase that comes to mind is cold-bloodedness. Vicious, bloodthirsty, hands-on killer. But nonetheless, he was a cold-blooded mass murderer.
Sometimes the question is asked, if that person wasn't alive, would the Holocaust still have happened? I think in every instance it would have happened, except in the case of Himmler, he made it happen.
But for Himmler, the Holocaust is just part of an even more fiendish master plan of mass murder.
The grander vision was all about turning Eastern Europe into a German empire. In Hitler's imagination, this did not only involve the murder of 5 or 6 million Jews, it involved the murder of millions of Slavs, so millions of Poles, millions of Soviet citizens. Altogether, they established that they would have to kill off 30 million people.
But Himmler remains distanced from the mass executions he orders, except for one pivotal incident.
In 1941, Himmler was inspecting some of the forward areas in Russia that had been conquered, and a group of Jewish civilians had been rounded up, and they were put in a trench, and the trench was surrounded by German soldiers, and Himmler had never seen an execution before, and so he was naturally curious to watch what was going on, and he maybe got a little too close to the edge of the trench, and when one of the prisoners was shot, some of the blood and brains splattered onto his face and his uniform, and he was sickened by this, and had to leave the scene.
That episode in Minsk convinced Himmler that they, the Nazis, had to come up with a better way of killing people. This way of killing people with guns close range, where some of them lived in Ramoning, and then others were trying to get out of the pit and run away, and you had to track them down and kill them. This was not going to work for 6 million people.
But Himmler was not concerned about the victims. His problem was the killers. These men, this is hard work, this is nasty work. What are we doing to them psychologically? So his concern was, how can we find a more humane way to kill for the killer? So that led to a search for different killing methods. Some of them were quite bizarre. One idea was to dynamite Jews in mental institutions, for example. So you get lots of Jews into a building, and then you dynamite the building. Another idea was, and this was carried out once, was to boil Jews in slaked lime.
Himmler sanctions yet another method of mass extermination that becomes the prototype of his lethally efficient death camps. Among the thousands of victims is Jerry Springer's maternal grandmother.
They took her to a place called Helmo. It's not an extermination camp you heard much about. And they put about 60 people at a time in these vans, and then they shut the door in the van and they pour the gas in. And it's a 20-minute ride to the fields, which were the mass burial grounds. In that 20 minutes, there was enough gas put into the back of the van that everyone in the van died. So when they got there, you were already dead, and then they took the bodies, and thousands of them, and just dumped them into this mass grave. And so these vans were the precursor of the gas chambers that we all read about.
Near the end of the war, Himmler's priority becomes to conceal the evidence of his atrocities. His effort serves only to magnify his evil.
And late March, early April of '45, when the Allies were closing in on Germany from all sides, he sent out this order to all of the commandants of the concentration camps, and he said, get rid of your inmates. I don't want the Allies to find camps filled with sick and starving people. And so he instituted what we call today the death marches.
Where the Nazis would take all of the inmates who were already emaciated and made them march across Poland so they can reach Ravensbrück or other camps that were considered safe. People died along the way. They were shot along the way. They were punched and savagely treated along the way.
But when Himmler isn't enacting vicious decrees of mass death, he devotes himself and vast Nazi resources towards his bizarre belief in Germany's occult past.
He had this idea that he wanted to sort of create a pre-Christian Germany, sort of what was Germany like in ancient times.
Himmler, in some way, was a madman about the mythic roots of the Nazi Party and the Aryan race, and he traced it back to the Knights of the Round Table and Arthurian mythology, and he actually had a huge castle built at Wolfsburg with all sorts of Holy Grail, Arthurian motifs.
In the castle, they had special chambers where everything is very mystical, and a lot of secret rituals that would go on that we'll probably never know about because the evidence has been destroyed.
It was ludicrous, and it just shows in some way the horror of the kind of people who were ruling Germany.
Heinrich Himmler made Hitler's vision of the Holocaust a reality. But to do so, he needs his own lieutenants, including a man so cold-blooded that Hitler nicknames him the man with the iron heart, Reinhard Heydrich. No tyrant in history has equaled the evil of Adolf Hitler, but Hitler's villainous exploits are never a one-man show. He depends on the methodical evil of Heinrich Himmler to spearhead the murders of millions. And in turn, Himmler relies on his own henchman, a man destined to become the lead planner of the final solution to exterminate the Jews, the blonde beast, Reinhard Heydrich.
Heydrich was the one top Nazi who looked like a Nazi. What I mean by that is, when they're preaching about Aryan superiority and blonde hair and blue eyes and everything else, Heydrich looks the part. What's interesting about it is there was a rumor that was bandied about for a while that he had Jewish blood. Well, Himmler used that to motivate him. Himmler said, they think you've got Jewish blood. You've got to prove them wrong. And he proved it by being the toughest son of a bitch of anybody.
Heydrich earns his ruthless reputation as head of Nazi Germany's secret police, the Gestapo. He molds it into an instrument of terror, empowered by Hitler's chilling three-word decree, night and fog.
That was the initial term that people gave to the disappearing of dissidents, communists, Jews, socialists.
We go in at night and we just take them. We arrest them. We don't need a search warrant or a reason or anything else.
My cousin, she lived in Berlin, and she remembered when her dad and his brothers would not spend the night at their apartment because when the SS came, or when the soldiers came and banged on the door at 2 in the morning, they didn't want them to find, her there and her mother.
But Heydrich's Gestapo does more than just make people disappear. It also subjects them to sadistic interrogations.
They would use knives, they would have doctors come in, they would do small amounts of surgery and torture. They were very big on beatings, they would use electric prods. They did an equivalent of what would be early waterboarding by putting you in a bathtub and holding your head underneath the water. They would do cold ice baths.
They might have had their fingers crushed in a vise, or they might bring in family members and abuse the family member in front of this person as a way of inducing them to talk.
One interesting thing about Heydrich is he personally introduced the process where the next prisoner to be interrogated was held outside the door where the current prisoner was being interrogated. So that after an hour of screams, yells, you were a little bit more willing to talk because you knew what was coming.
In 1942, Hitler sends Heydrich to Czechoslovakia to crush all resistance to Nazi rule. But partisans assassinate him as he is driven through Prague.
Hitler went into a rage, and he ordered 2 towns destroyed and all of their inhabitants killed. The towns of Lidice and Lazaki were to be leveled, wiped off the map.
And then he launched something called Operation Reinhard as a tribute to Heydrich himself. And what was that? That was the opening of the death camps at Sobibor and Treblinka. So the tribute to Heydrich was, in your name we'll open up death camps.
But Heydrich's evil legacy extends far beyond Hitler's vengeance. 4 months before his death, he assembled a secret meeting of high Nazi officials called the Wannsee Conference, where they launched their infamous final solution that would result in the murder of 6 million Jews.
And it was at this meeting that the mechanism for rounding up, transporting, and killing and disposing of the bodies of millions of people was discussed in a very dispassionate way, much as, a group of bankers might talk about, how do we increase our profits for the next quarter. After the meeting was over, they had brandy and cigars.
Taking the minutes of that meeting is a nondescript bureaucrat whose gift for organization has propelled him to a high position in the administration of the SS. Hitler has no better choice to keep the machinery of the Holocaust on schedule than Adolf Eichmann.
After the Wannsee Conference, Eichmann's job was to be sort of the chief operating officer of the Holocaust, to coordinate all the train transport schedules.
Not an easy thing, by the way. Thousands and thousands of train cars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people being moved in the middle of a war zone eventually. He has to run it to a T, so when the train says it's going to be there at 10:30 at night, right in rolling into Auschwitz, it does that.
Eichmann was tasked with making sure the gas chambers were built and that there were facilities for housing the Jews before they were sent to the gas chamber. So all of the nitty-gritty details were basically put in Eichmann's lap.
It was just so methodical. They wrote down the day you were put on the car into the train, like the cattle cars, the number of the car you were in, when you were fed, what you were given to eat, what medical experiments were done on you.
Eichmann will later claim he was just a bureaucrat following orders, but statements he makes during the Holocaust reveal his zeal for Hitler's perverse crusade.
The most famous quote from Eichmann is something he said to one of his comrades toward the end of the war when the comrade asked, "We're probably going to die," and Eichmann said, "Well, I will leap into the grave with a smile, knowing I have the death of 5 million Jews on my conscience."
In the waning days of World War II, Eichmann's devotion to the final solution is evident when Heinrich Himmler orders a stop to death camp deportations.
That's not acceptable to Eichmann, so Eichmann continues doing it, even though he's been told he shouldn't, deport any more Jews. So I think that's one example where you see, that Eichmann really is a fanatic.
As chief administrator of the Holocaust, Adolf Eichmann carries out this fanaticism from behind the safe confines of a desk. But for the actual dirty business of murder, Hitler must go into the trenches and dredge up thugs whose perversity rivals his own.
Stehen fest, zusammen!
Adolf Hitler and his inner circle are history's ultimate manifestation of evil. But their record of atrocities is only possible because they have groomed an army of subordinates to do their bidding.
You talk about Hitler and Goebbels and all these horrible leaders, but then what about this mass population that is just, at the end of the day, because they live there, do they then go home and they have dinner with their wives and their kids and, gee, how was your day today? What do they say?
One working-class husband and wife can share stories of the atrocities they commit. He is a former bank clerk, she a secretary. But he rises to become commandant of the infamous Buchenwald concentration camp, and she is there at his side, Karl Otto and Ilse Koch.
Karl Koch was quite a philanderer. He had contracted syphilis on a trip to Norway in 1940, and when he got back to the camp, two of the people who treated him were actually inmate orderlies. He didn't want the word to leak out, either to his superiors or to his wife, and so he decided that he would have these two orderlies killed.
The SS doesn't mind the unsanctioned murders, but they do mind when they uncover evidence of embezzlement.
Karl and his wife were seen to be ripping off the SS by stealing money and jewelry and even the gold teeth from dead inmates. He would have the prisoners write home to their relatives saying, if you can come up with 10,000 Reichsmarks, they'll let me out of here. And so he was just getting rich on these schemes.
Every mark the Kochs extort finances their garish lifestyle.
Well, Karl and Ilse Koch really regarded Buchenwald as their own personal fiefdom, and they were kind of the ruling lord and lady of this camp.
We know that she was an avid equestrian and that she used concentration camp labor and probably cash and other valuables taken from the victims to build an indoor riding complex for herself.
Karl Otto is eventually convicted of embezzlement and executed. But a lack of evidence frees Ilse to solidify her nickname, the Bitch of Buchenwald.
She would ride around the camp and she would tell the SS guards who were watching the work details, oh, make them do jumping jacks or make them roll around in the mud. There were testimony given during her war crimes trial in which prisoners would say she would ride up to them and stand, let's say, on the edge of a trench where they were digging a hole. And they would look up her dress and she would say, how dare you look up my dress? And she would take her riding crop and hit them in the face with that.
But such abuses pale in comparison to Ilse Koch's involvement in one of Nazi Germany's most monstrous sub-industries.
Tattoos became an obsession with people in the SS, and I think with Ilse as well. And many stories are told of her seeing shirtless prisoners on a work detail and saying to the SS supervisor, take down that man's number because I'd like to have some artifacts made from his skin. And a few weeks later, it might be a lampshade, it might be a book cover, it might be gloves, slippers, whatever.
While Ilse Koch commits her atrocities at Buchenwald, another notorious commandant is committing his own. In 1934, he had been a lowly guard at Dachau, but his sadistic record eventually vaulted him to a leadership role at Auschwitz. Joseph Kramer. One of Kramer's most memorable offenses occurs in 1944 as he plays a central role in creating a ghoulish pseudo-scientific exhibit.
An anatomist at the University of Strasbourg named August Hirt had the idea to create a collection of skeletons, mainly the skeletons of Jews, and to use them to create a kind of anthropological display.
At Natzweiler, Kramer receives a special shipment of prisoners to be used in Hirt's display and takes personal charge of their processing.
It is Joseph Kramer who is responsible for gassing them in August of 1944.
The Jewish skeleton collection never comes to be. But Kramer advances to take the reins of the infamous Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where he earns his nickname, the Beast of Belsen.
Toward the end of the war, Heinrich Himmler orders concentration camps to be evacuated, and Bergen-Belsen becomes a collecting point for concentration camp prisoners who are being evacuated. So there are thousands of prisoners converging on Bergen-Belsen on foot or by rail. Many of them are very close to death, and there is absolutely no way that they can be looked after in any way that will ensure their survival, and the conditions inside the camp very quickly become absolutely horrendous. There are outbreaks of typhus and dysentery. There's not adequate food. There's not adequate water. Josef Kramer oversees all of this.
Among the multitudes who perish on Kramer's watch is 15-year-old Anne Frank. Bergen-Belsen is soon liberated by British troops, and Josef Kramer is arrested, tried, and hung. He is largely forgotten, but Anne Frank's diary, an eloquent protest against Nazi evil published around the world, continues to inspire. Karl Otto Koch, his wife Ilse, and Josef Kramer did the face-to-face dirty work necessary to realize Hitler's vision. But other Nazis would go even further, redefining evil's limits, like the sadistic doctor whose medical experiments are straight out of Frankenstein, Dr. Joseph Mengele. The atrocities of Nazi Germany are a product not just of Adolf Hitler's evil, but of the vast network of evil he controls. It extends from his inner circle of administrators to his disciples in the trenches. But at the network's farthest reaches is a special breed of evil men. One is described as an unbalanced alcoholic, a psychopath, and a violent sadist. Yet precisely because of this, he is chosen to lead a Nazi military unit specializing in terror. Oskar Dirlewanger.
Oskar Dirlewanger, like millions of other German men, served during World War I, and it's unclear whether the war caused or exacerbated an extremely violent and sadistic part of his personality. Oskar Dirlewanger was imprisoned by the SS in a concentration camp, in part because he had been accused of molesting a teenage girl.
Dirlewanger is eventually released on the condition that he rejoin the military. That's when Heinrich Himmler hatches a sinister idea. Assemble a battalion of criminals to terrorize the civilians of Nazi-occupied territories and put Dirlewanger in charge.
So a brigade comprised of poachers and other criminals, taken in some cases from concentration camps, from SS military prisons, or from regular military prisons, who could be used to fight partisans, but also to liquidate Jewish ghettos.
Beginning in 1940, Dirlewanger's brigade takes sadistic pleasure in expanding the definition of wartime atrocities.
Dirlewanger's unit liked to force civilians into, say, a barn. The barn would be set on fire, and anyone who tried to escape would be gunned down. There were accusations that Dirlewanger himself would use poison on Jewish women for his own entertainment purposes. When the commando was dispatched to Warsaw, Polish civilians were thrown out of buildings. To survive the war and the uprising, Poles had set up hospitals underground. And Dirlewanger's men attacked those underground hospitals. They killed men, women, children, doctors, nurses.
While Oskar Dirlewanger pushes the boundaries of evil in Poland, a sadistic doctor does the same at Auschwitz. He had attended Germany's finest medical schools, then served as a medical officer until he transferred to Auschwitz in 1943. He sees the camp as a human laboratory for his bizarre experiments. He is the angel of death, Dr. Joseph Mengele. Mengele earns his nickname while engaging in his favorite pastime, determining the fate of prisoners as they arrive at the camp.
They'd often arrive in the middle of the night, the cattle cars would be opened up, and there they would meet SS guards with dogs and usually two doctors who would be standing and say, with fingers, looking at them, to the right or to the left. To the right meant they were going to live, they were going into the camp. To the left, they were going straight to the gas chambers. Every doctor had to do that duty. Most of them did not like it. Mengele loved it. He volunteered for it. He did extra duty, extra selections, because he was looking for specimens for his experiments.
Among the countless specimens Mengele selects, his most valued choices are twins.
If a doctor or scientist does an experiment on animals, they will try to get two animals that are very, very similar. In terms of human experiments, the ideal situation is to have twins, because one child becomes the control and the other one you do the experiments on. The other thing is, could he unlock the reason why, when a woman becomes pregnant, sometimes it becomes 2 eggs and she has 2 children at every birth? If he could unlock that secret, that means every good German mother after the war could replenish the German war dead by having 2 children at every birth instead of just 1. He would be the father of the new Germany.
Mengele's experiments are barbaric, but he feels free to pursue any idea in the name of Nazi science.
Mengele pretty much did a combination of everything. What I mean by that is injections into the eyes. We assumed to see if he could turn them blue, which caused blindness most of the times. He would kill one twin with chloroform to the heart and then do an autopsy immediately while the other twin was alive to see if the organs might match up and he could do something else. He did some experiments where he would cut somebody and force an infection. He did other experiments when he put solvents underneath the head of children to see if he could turn the hair a different color. He would at times use high amounts of heat to see if he could damage internal organs. Mengele would do lumbar punctures. He would do sometimes surgery on the spine of some of the children without anesthesia to see how they responded.
But Mengele's most barbaric experiment may have been the one he performed on twin boys named Tito and Nino.
Mengele was accused of attempting to sew these twins together, back to back. And the accusation was that the twins had survived this procedure, but of course were in agonizing pain, and that their mother, who was also in the camp, had somehow managed to obtain lethal doses of morphine and then administered them to her own children in order to put them out of their misery.
The end of the war finally puts a stop to Mengele's evil and that of all of Hitler's henchmen. But what becomes of them? Who faces trial? Who takes their own life? And who gets away? The Allies' victory in 1945 puts a halt to Adolf Hitler's unprecedented evil. Now, he and his accomplices must face the consequences of their crimes. In Berlin, Hitler shoots himself in his bunker to avoid capture. Down the hall, Joseph Goebbels follows his lead, but shocks many by making his suicide a family affair.
After Hitler killed himself, Goebbels not only committed suicide himself, but his wife took poison, and they gave all 6 of the children first sleeping pills, I think, and then they gave them all cyanide pills and killed all of them.
Heinrich Himmler is captured by the British, but soon after takes his own life by biting into a cyanide capsule.
Himmler's death was surprising because it ended with a whimper, not with a bang.
Hermann Goering is captured and later convicted at Nuremberg. He is sentenced to death and asks to face a firing squad like a soldier. When he learns he is to be hung like a common criminal, he cheats the gallows with his own cyanide capsule.
Goering intended his suicide to be a grand theatrical gesture, an act of defiance, telling the Americans and the other allies, I am not going out the way you want. I'm going out the way I want.
Ilse Koch also stands trial and stuns prosecutors with a startling declaration.
She announced that she was pregnant, and she was 8 months pregnant, and it's never been confirmed who the father of her child was, but she was convicted. She was sentenced to life imprisonment.
20 years into her sentence, in 1967, Koch hangs herself with her bedsheets. Oskar Dirlewanger never lives to stand trial. After his capture, he faces a swifter and more brutal justice.
But he was arrested at the beginning of June 1945 by French occupation forces. And a few days later, he was dead. There is some testimony from one of his cellmates who claims that some prison guards who were Poles working in the service of the French occupiers beat him to death.
Adolf Eichmann eludes capture and flees to Argentina. He lives there in quiet anonymity until 1960, when he is finally located by the Israeli intelligence service.
The team of Israeli agents went to Argentina in disguise and snatched him away and flew him back to Israel, where he was put on trial and was found guilty and hanged.
Only one of Hitler's evil comrades chronicled over the past hour makes a clean getaway. Joseph Mengele never sees the inside of a jail cell and never faces execution or assassination.
When the war was over, Mengele did what every high-ranking Nazi did with crimes and blood on their hands. He ran.
He ends up, again, living quietly in Brazil. What we know is that in 1979, he was swimming and he either had a stroke or a heart attack and he died.
But evil has a knack of transcending the grave. Sightings of Mengele continue for years, despite the fact that a forensic analysis in 1985 confirms he is dead.
Mengele would now be over 100 years old. At some point at 120, I guess people will stop looking for him, but as a practical matter, Nazis did fake their deaths sometimes after the war in order to escape Nazi hunters.
7 decades have passed since the fall of the Third Reich, yet Adolf Hitler and his infamous cohorts remain the standard by which evil is measured. Their atrocities define the darkest dimension of human behavior and remind us of the enormous cost of sweeping evil from the earth.